I mean, I would go out painting alone at times, and that was really awkward because people always thought I was a prostitute. But like, so that was sort of like annoying. But I don't think, but when I went out with other people, obviously that wasn't the case. But it was, I mean, yeah, we never really were approached. But I mean, no one had any like, you know, no one cared about anyone else really. I mean, it was very safe. It was incredibly safe at that point. Like nothing. I mean, in San Francisco, if you went like to specific areas of San Francisco, it could be sketchier, but it was definitely, I mean, Sixth and Market was always super crazy and hectic, and we were always like being chased by people with knives or something, but it wasn't really like, I mean, it definitely, you know, felt very safe. And we were always on bikes, which is so crazy. We felt like you could get away from anything on a bike. I mean, you could go further and into different places than you could with a car. Or, I mean, the tunnels were completely empty. I mean, no one ever was in there. I don't know. It was just sort of like a free-for-all. No one, you know, cared. I mean, it was fun. I mean, we'd always, you know, start by drinking in a bar, and then you end up going out and, you know, hanging on the street. So, I mean, Barry never drank, so he was never at a bar. I mean, Barry probably didn't really, like, hang out like other people did. He was a little bit more sort of straight, so to speak, you know, and we were kind of a little bit wilder probably than he was. So, but again, he was a little bit older than us, so, which made kind of a difference, really. But, I mean, Barry was always, like, super career-minded, you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't ever going to do anything that didn't help himself, that's for sure. And I think that we were a little bit, like, who gives a fuck, you know? We were a little bit more, like, you know, we didn't care so much. But, Barry always was incredibly ambitious, you know, and doing more sort of like what I said, like he was way more involved with like institutions and what have you at that point. So he had sort of like a foot in that world more so. And yeah, I just felt like sort of like a wild card, I don't know, but it was, I mean, in terms of like being on the street, there was no one ever there. I mean, there was other writers that you'd run into, and that was probably more of a drama than just sort of like pedestrians or what have you, you know. But we never really sort of, it was all super chill. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seemed like.
What was KR like back then?
Craig's super funny. Very New York. Very like, Craig's a very curious person. He's very sweet, but he also has like a really like, he's like a super like thief also. I mean, he definitely was craftier than most people, I would say, but you wouldn't really know it because he's really like kind. And I don't know, Josh and Gray, like Jonas, I mean, Josh learned a lot from Jonas, from hanging out with Gray. And then, and that was like sort of like Jonas was always had sort of like this, Jonas was really sort of pivotal in terms of sort of bridging like pop culture and graph. Like he really sort of like brought this sort of like lo-fi element. I mean, there was a lot of like art that we were looking at, you know, like Raymond Patamon and like Mike Kelly and sort of like the music we were listening to, and it all sort of like in like Paul McCarthy, and there was like artists that influenced, at least for me, because we were going to art school, it was sort of like a lot of that sort of like ended up on the street to some extent, you know, and like I said, it was not like super traditional. And like Craig was an amazing photographer, and I'm sure that people know about his photography, but I mean, everyone, or like for me, I'm like waiting for his photography book to come out, like whenever that is, because Craig was, whereas like Barry was like a printmaker and like I was a painter, like Craig was a photographer. And so when we were going out at night painting, Craig always had his camera. And that's the other thing that's so crazy, is that like it was so chill in San Francisco. Craig was using like a powerful like flash and his camera while we were out. And so it just goes to show like how sort of chill, because we'd be up on rooftops with like a flash. And so, I mean, he has thousands of images of us, just like this small group of people in the small, you know, sort of like space and time of San Francisco in the 90s. As he like documented it all.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's like an endless amount of photography. I mean, and I did also, to some extent, I would take like a Holga. I mean, also like people have to remember that like we didn't have digital photography. We only had like, you know, film and like negatives and sort of in slides. I mean, I remember taking like slides out, like I had a lot of slides of graph and stuff like that. But I mean, it was just like all different kinds of photography. And I would use a Holga with a flash. And but Craig has like thousands of photographs of us bombing and like our whole life. And like, you know, us stealing stuff. Like I took a bunch of pictures of us, like of just like our piles of like stuff that we would steal. It was so much fun to like document all the stuff that we would steal, and sort of like the whole, like when you wake up in the morning and then when you go out at night, like it was just like all documented. Like Craig has like everything. I mean, it was just sort of like art and culture and magazines and zines and comics and underground and like the beat movement and all the artists of the Bay Area. It all like went into what we were doing. And so, I mean, I think there was just like a richness there that I don't really know. I mean, there's a richness somewhere now. I mean, it's definitely not like, you know, every generation has its stuff, you know what I mean? But that's what we had. And so like generations now have something else. But I mean, that was definitely like our world. We were working with like a lot of like palpable sort of like physical things, you know, like negatives and cameras and paint and different kinds of paint and wheat paste and ink and mops. And it was sort of like everything was available and everything was like okay. No one was like, I mean, I definitely got a bunch of shit for like painting horses, like no joke.
Man, I've seen some real cool ones. There's some guy that does like a horse.
Oh, that's a girl.
What?
Reminisce.
Well, I mean, the horse came from, like, I grew up between Marin County and a town called Benicia. Like, my dad lived in a town called Benicia. My mom lived in Marin County. And so I grew up riding horses in Marin County. And, like, I was a super, like, what you'd call, like, a horse girl, what have you. Like, I would paint and I would draw horses all the time since I was a little girl. And so it was super familiar for me to do that on the street, I think, and sort of, like, life size also. So it was sort of something super easy that I gravitated towards. And I never felt like I was really good at, like, graph or, like, writing, or like my tags suck or whatever, you know what I mean? Like I was not super good at traditional graph anyhow. And so I just gravitated towards a horse or imagery of some kind or another. But I mean, I definitely, like, when I started writing with Craig and sort of like that whole traditional element of graph became known to me, I think I really worked hard at doing lettering and sort of like traditional graph more so, and I got a little bit better. But I mean, I never was like super great at it in my mind, but and that didn't really bother me. But I think that there was a point, at some point, I really had to like prove myself with letters and like, you know, tagging and what have you, and that was really annoying. But it was also like very much so a gender thing. Like I was a girl and I was like painting horses. But I think that, and a lot of writers were really harsh on me about that, and they were all dudes, you know what I mean? But it was like, I think I mean, that's the other reason why I was so driven to go like all city or to fucking bomb like fuck, because that was the only way that I could like get any respect from like graph writers, and that really like mattered to me. But at some point in the beginning, but then at some point I was just like, fuck that. And I kind of dropped it like around 95. I didn't really care anymore. So I sort of like reverted back to even more image-based work. Like I said, like I think in 95 I was going out way more with like paintbrushes and doing murals and sort of like illegal murals, like full-on murals with like bucket paint and just to sort of like fuck that world, because it was just like so sort of nasty in terms of like who was a real writer. Like I really gave a shit, you know, about who was a real writer, because like traditional graph really, like our piecing was so uninteresting to me. Like I said, it was like, there was no way in fucking hell I'd go to like a legal wall and fucking work all day on some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, no way. And so, I mean, I really loved bombing and I really liked tagging and what have you. It was like, you know, that's what graph was for me. And so, yeah, and so I feel like I cared about that for a hot minute in terms of like proving myself, but then I was sort of like, whatever. But also because, I mean, graph to some extent is super straight, you know what I mean? Like it's like a straight male world, and I really did not come from that, you know? Like again, I came from this whole like sexual freedom, you know, like my mom was like sexually free and woman, you know, and it was just like, I didn't really give a shit about this male centric shit, you know? And so I think that I just like did it for a minute, and then it was just like so annoying, all the shit I got about like being a girl and like doing horses. And so, yeah, I like bombed a lot and like was just like, fuck you, and then like wanted to just like walk away and do something else, you know what I mean? Like I just wanted to sort of like quell that talk and then just like leave it. So that was sort of like something that I wanted to do and get off my chest. But it was also, I mean, the horses, yeah, but I really like the image of a horse, you know? There was something about, I mean, it seems sort of like all American, and like this sort of like idea sort of like symbolized like freedom or like leaving or just like walking away or just sort of like fuck you or something. There was just like a little bit of something, a little bit like wild card about it that I really liked, you know, in that image for sure. It definitely wasn't like a girly thing in my mind, but that I was doing. Although I did sort of get like hyper femme after the whole like male scene sort of like nausea that I got. But I mean, I definitely loved like the energy of graph writers. It wasn't like I was like hating on graph writers. I just was annoyed with how like small it was, you know, in that sort of like like straight sense. I saw it as more like open, like, yeah, you could be like the city is your canvas, you know, it's like you could do anything out there, you know what I mean? Like I didn't want to just see like, I just wanted it more complex, I guess, in my mind. Like that's sort of like, I wanted to do my little like gallery on the street, and like I just wanted like funny sort of like kooky things, you know, also. But yeah, I wanted it to be more expansive, I feel, and it was like tiresome to be around such a male-centric sort of, I mean, because, yeah, it was like I was never going to be good at like traditional graph anyhow, you know what I mean? And so, whatever. I mean, yeah, people really remember those horses. It's crazy, you know? It's sort of like, it's nice. I mean, I loved doing them. I loved like sitting on a rooftop at night, like smoking a cigarette and like looking at the city. It was like amazing, you know, it was like fun, super fun, you know?